Migration has become a hot button issue in the Belgian capital. It was recently highlighted by Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, who implored to European parliamentarians that they must tackle illegal migration. This would be the focus of Poland helming its EU Council presidency, and this announcement comes at least a couple of weeks after human rights organisations release damning reports about the brutal pushbacks occurring between Poland and Belarus at that border. But according to the Same, these pushbacks need to occur as they keep Poland safe from hybrid threats. My name is Angela Scoogens. This is TVP World, and I'm joined in the Brussels studio by our guest, Antonios Nestoras. He is the founder of the European Policy Innovation Council think tank here in Brussels, and he is here to explain the political reality of what is going on at the border. Hi, Antonios.
Hello, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for coming on. So what's your read of the situation between Poland and Belarus? Do you think that Russia is behind the almost 30,000 border crossings that happened in 2024 between Poland and Belarus?
Look, Angie, you can never be sure with these hybrid threats, but you can tell by the fact that this doesn't seem like a regular and natural migratory flow. We're talking about a massive migratory flow that is concentrated, and it seems like it's orchestrated, organized by state actors. So I would be inclined to say that this is not a normal migration incident, but rather an organized hybrid threat.
I think we've seen from some of those reports that came out today linking Belarusian officials and some of those activities, but why would Moscow be behind an attack like this? Does it have a history of weaponizing migration?
Yes, generally speaking, migration has been used in the past as a weapon. It is not the first time that we see it, even in Europe. Greece has been under similar threats in the past years as well, coming from the border with the land border with Turkey. And generally speaking, unfortunately, we live in a complicated world where the line between war and peace is a bit blurred. So we have these cyber attacks, for example. We have trade wars. We have even migration being used as a weapon, unfortunately. So these are extreme circumstances. As I said, we cannot talk about this incidence as a normal migration phenomenon. This seems like it is organized and orchestrated.
Yeah, and how, going back to that example that you just gave about Greece and Turkey, how did that result? How did that conflict resolve? Has it resolved?
Well, Greece has also erected a border wall with Turkey, and it has received a lot of migrants and refugees, and the fact that they crossed the border did not seem to solve the humanitarian situation. They are still concentrated in concentration camps, basically, and Europe is at a loss at how to deal with that phenomenon too.
Yeah, and I mean, we know that this is a focus as part of the EU Council presidency. They want to look at security in various forms. But I'm curious as to how this could manifest into policy, aside from strengthening borders and maybe allowing some concessions for countries like Poland that do these pushbacks.
That's a very good question. I mean, as I said, these are extreme circumstances, and they may require extreme different set of tools in order to deal with these migratory flows. We're not talking about a normal situation. It would be like comparing a thunder strike with a missile strike. So we're talking about two different things. We need to be much more strict with the migratory flows at the moment, but at the same time we have to think what other policies can actually mitigate this phenomenon, especially when it is orchestrated by Russia, Belarus or Turkey, it doesn't matter. So a solution would be to have a migrant visa for Europe, for example, right? Every other region that welcomes migrants has some sort of a regime for legal migration that covers some of the needs of the society and the economy in that region. The US have it, Canada has it, Australia has it as well. Now that Europe has a historical compromise with the new migration and asylum pact that was voted just before the elections, we can actually talk about policies like a European migrant visa, that can actually mitigate this phenomenon in very simple terms. It would be much safer for the people who are looking for asylum or who are looking to come here to work and live with us peacefully to apply for a migrant visa instead of just playing at the hands of either slave laborers or states and intelligence services, and put their lives in danger.
And it's interesting that you bring up the Migration Pact, because we know that Poland, at least the last time I checked, have not submitted their national implementation plan. So even if there was this migration visa and this was agreed upon, it doesn't seem, at least at this stage, that Poland is ready to come to the table and have those negotiations, because they said when they didn't want to submit their plan that they were going to focus instead on strengthening that border and that flank. So I mean, this is a great option, but how could it be rolled out if countries don't even want to come to the table?
Look, we have to understand also the political reality, and we've had a long pre-election period. We had a long period after elections where we had to confirm the commission and the new MEPs to take their place in the parliament and so on. So it will take some time to actually pass into the implementation phase. But this is the most important part of this migration and asylum pact. And what I can say is that we need a concentrated effort. We need to be methodical and systematic. Commission needs to take initiative. The Parliament needs to control the implementation of the new Migration and Asylum Pact. And this is the way that we can also, let's say, push the national governments to come to the table, because it's an organized, concentrated effort to implement it.
And, I'm hearing from some of my diplomatic sources that Poland will use its time helming the presidency to explore innovative solutions to the migration crisis. There's talk of return hubs and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see how that is followed through. But is Poland acting within the bounds of EU law by pushing back and turning back these people that are trying to claim asylum?
The reality is that this is a grey zone. As I said, we're not talking about a natural migratory phenomenon here. We're talking about a hybrid kind of warfare. Therefore, I'm very curious to see what these innovative solutions are that the Polish presidency may submit or suggest or propose. But we really have to understand that this is something extraordinary. And it's something that, look, at the end of the day, we have to guarantee also the security of our people here, our citizens. And we have a long tradition of hospitality. People are in principle welcome here, as long as they're peaceful. But they have to knock on our door at the same time. It's like when they come to your house, they have to knock on your door. They cannot break the door down and just enter. It's the same thing. We are peaceful, we are hospitable, we are humane. We want to follow the international law, but at the same time, we cannot just let someone break down the door and enter whenever they want.
Yeah. So, I mean, should Poland revise the way that it allows migrants in? You mentioned this earlier, but should they expand some of their visa schemes or things like that? Is that another way of fixing this problem?
This is what I believe. A migrant visa, expanding the visa schemes to create different categories of people, making agreements with the states or the regions that are sending migrants, having faster, but this is already part of the Migration Pact, having faster processing of asylum applications and so on. There is, as I said, a number of ways. There is a set of tools that we have at our disposal, but it needs to be concentrated from Europe. And not unilaterally.
And I mean, we know that there's a presidential election coming up in Poland. Do you think that, I mean, this talk of migration could be impacting the zeitgeist there in Poland before that election? Do we know whether both parties kind of want to rail against some of these migration policies, or are they both for stronger border control?
This is what usually happens. I believe that they're both in favor of stronger border control. With meaningful variations. I mean, I've heard some reports and I saw some videos online of people saying we will shoot everyone on sight, but we're not barbarians, you know. We have to have a humane way to deal with the issue. But of course, it always happens like this, where European issues or national issues become conflated with elections, and we always have some sort of election in Europe. That's another particularity here.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm also curious as to whether migration and security have always been linked in this way. Has there always been, I guess, this fear around the migrants, like it is being kind of perpetuated in Poland right now?
Certain political forces, especially from the right, have been using this, even when it's normal, even when it's a physical phenomenon, they have been using it for political purposes, instrumentalizing the migrants. But this is something that we have to deal with. The human species is a migratory species, whether we like it or not, and we have been migrants ourselves as Europeans in the past. It's just this change is very uncomfortable for us. We were sending out migrants, and now we have to receive it. We have to have a wider discussion what to do with it as Europeans, and how to deal with this dramatic change over the past years. And until that happens, we can, as you said, implement some of the policies that mitigate the phenomenon. But there are innovative ways, like the migrant visa, to go forward.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people may find difficulty talking about this issue in particular because, you know, speaking about migration, people might be worried about being branded a conservative, but as we can see from what's happening between Poland and Belarus at that border, it's a lot more nuanced than perhaps what we think. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us, Antonios.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you so much for watching. My name is Angela Skujins and this is TVP World. But make sure you stick around even after this wraps up, as more news, analysis and commentary is coming up. See you next time.